My name is Kendra Ellison, and for most of my life, I believed love was something you earned. You earned it by being dependable, by helping when no one else would, by showing up without being asked, and by never complaining when your efforts went unnoticed. For years, that belief shaped every relationship I had with my family, until the day my son asked a question that changed everything. It was his 8th birthday. For weeks, he had been counting down the days. He talked about it constantly, the scavenger hunt he wanted, the carrot cake he'd requested, and most importantly, the grandparents he hoped would come. My parents had promised they would try. A few days before the party, Dad called. "Money's a little tight right now," he explained. "We probably won't make it." I understood. At least, I thought I did. Life happens. People get busy. Circumstances change. So I adjusted. I scaled back the decorations, canceled a few extras, bought fewer party supplies, and when my son looked disappointed, I reassured him. "Grandma and Grandpa love you," I told him. "They'll celebrate with you another time." The party came and went. Friends laughed, kids ran through the backyard. My son smiled and enjoyed every moment, but every few minutes he glanced toward the driveway, waiting, hoping, watching. The grandparents he loved never arrived. That hurt. But what happened the next morning hurt even more. While drinking coffee, I opened social media. And there they were, my parents, smiling, laughing, surrounded by mountains of presents. The photos had been posted the same day as my son's birthday. Only they weren't celebrating him. They were celebrating my sister's children. Designer toys, expensive electronics, decorations everywhere. A huge family gathering. The caption read, "Nothing makes us happier than spoiling our grandkids." I stared at the screen, not because of the gifts, not because of the money, but because of the message. My son had been forgotten. Again. Later that afternoon, he sat quietly on the floor drawing dinosaurs. After a few minutes, he looked up at me. "Mom?" "Yes, buddy?" He hesitated, then asked softly, "Don't they need me too?" The room felt impossibly quiet. Children rarely ask complicated questions. They ask simple ones, and somehow those are always the hardest to answer. I sat beside him and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "No," I said gently. "They don't love you less." But deep inside, I knew something had to change. Not because of what they had done to me, because of what it was teaching him. That night, after he went to sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. For years, I had helped my parents financially whenever they needed support. Mortgage assistance, unexpected expenses, holiday costs, school activities, family emergencies. I never kept score. I never wanted credit. I simply believed helping family was the right thing to do. But as I reviewed everything, one realization became impossible to ignore. I had spent years investing in relationships that rarely invested back. Not emotionally, not consistently, not equally. For the first time, I asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. What if helping wasn't actually helping? What if it was enabling a pattern that hurt everyone involved? The answer changed everything. Over the following weeks, I quietly reorganized my finances. I removed myself from commitments I had been carrying alone. I established clear boundaries. And most importantly, I stopped trying to purchase belonging through sacrifice. Predictably, people noticed. The phone calls started. Then the texts. Then the questions. "Why are you pulling away? Why are you being difficult? Why are you making this such a big deal?" But something stood out. Nobody asked how my son felt. Nobody asked why I was hurting. The conversation was always about their discomfort, never about our experience. That was when I understood something important. People often call boundaries selfish when they benefited from your lack of them. One evening, my sister called. "You're overreacting," she said. "It was one birthday." I listened quietly. Then I asked a simple question. Do you remember how many birthdays my son has celebrated without you showing up? Silence. Long silence. Eventually, she changed the subject. That told me everything I needed to know, because the issue was never one birthday. It was a pattern. 1,000 small moments, missed opportunities, forgotten milestones, promises that were never kept, and children always notice patterns, even when adults pretend they don't. The hardest part wasn't creating distance. The hardest part was accepting reality. I had spent years hoping that one conversation would fix everything. One holiday, one heartfelt discussion, one breakthrough. But some people cannot change until they are willing to see themselves honestly, and you cannot force that process. You can only decide what role you will play moving forward. Months passed. Slowly, life became lighter. Not perfect, just healthier. My son stopped asking when certain relatives would visit. He stopped waiting by the window, stopped checking his tablet for messages that never came. Instead, he focused on people who consistently showed up. Friends, teachers, neighbors, coaches. People who remembered his birthday because they cared, not because they were obligated. One evening, while we were building a model dinosaur together, he looked at me and smiled. This was the best year. I laughed. Really? He nodded. Because we spent it together. Children have a way of simplifying truths. Adults spend decades overcomplicating. That moment taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. Love is not measured by grand gestures. It isn't measured by expensive gifts, or social media photos, or public displays. Real love is consistency. It is presence. It is remembering. It is showing up. Around that time, my father reached out. The message surprised me. There was no blame, no defensiveness, no guilt, just honesty. For the first time in a long time, he admitted mistakes had been made. He acknowledged moments that should have been handled differently. And while it wasn't a perfect apology, it was real. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with dramatic reconciliation. Sometimes it begins with one person finally telling the truth. We exchanged a few conversations over the following months, carefully, slowly, without expectations. Some wounds heal quickly, others require patience. But I had learned something valuable. Reconciliation and boundaries can exist together. Forgiveness does not require returning to unhealthy patterns. You can care about someone while still protecting your peace. The two are not opposites. They are partners. The following year, when my son's birthday arrived, we celebrated differently. Nothing extravagant. Just people who genuinely wanted to be there. Friends, neighbors, classmates, people who had become chosen family. The house was noisy. The cake leaned slightly to one side. The decorations weren't perfect, but every person in that room showed up because they wanted to. And that made all the difference. As I watched my son laugh with his friends, I realized something. For years, I had been trying to convince people to value us. Now, I was building a life with people who already did. That shift changed everything. Near the end of the party, my son ran over and wrapped his arms around me. "Mom? Yeah? This was my favorite birthday ever." "Why?" He grinned. "Because everybody here wanted to come." I felt tears gather in my eyes, not from sadness, from relief. Because after years of chasing approval, I finally understood something. Home isn't the place where you're tolerated. It's the place where you're cherished. Family isn't defined only by history. It's defined by effort. And love isn't proven by what people say. It's proven by how they consistently show up. That was the lesson my son taught me, the lesson that changed our lives. The day I stopped begging to be included wasn't the day I lost my family. It was the day I started building a healthier one. And in the quiet that followed, we discovered something better than approval. We discovered peace. The kind that doesn't come from being chosen by others. The kind that comes from finally choosing yourself.